Started out on violin. Played violin for approximately 7 years, and stood on a lot of street corners and passed the hat, made a little money that way to buy food for the rest of the kids. 10 kids and the family. No shoes. I bought my first pair of shoes with we passed the hat the first time in Moultrie, Georgia, where I'm originally from. We made $5 that day, all day long. So we were very happy. And I bought me a pair of shoes, a pair of overalls, and went home happy.
What did your father do for a living?
He used to switch on me. I made the living. I made the living for 7 years that way.
What kind of music were you playing?
Oh, strictly country.
When did you switch from fiddle to the guitar?
In the service. I went in the service in 42 at 18. Went through the front lines, collected the blue ribbon, which is the Purple Heart and all this type of thing, and wound up in special service. The boys in special service from the city, they didn't dig a country boy too much on fiddle, you know, playing hoedowns, this type of thing. So in the same unit was Tony Matella. I heard him practicing one day in the corner. Started listening, and I picked up on it. I really dug the guitar.
Do you remember your first guitar?
Oh, yes. I believe it was a Stella, a thing I got from the Red Cross.
So when you got back home, you decided to go back into learning the guitar rather than going back to play fiddle?
I love guitar, yes. So I spent all my time on guitar from then on.
Some of your major influences?
Well, the only guy that I really enjoyed, and it turned me on every time I listened to it, was Django Reinhardt. And even the country boys got to know Django Reinhardt.
That's interesting that Django Reinhardt would be the first guitarist you mention. You ignore, at first mention, all of the other country guitarists at the time, which was about 1945 when you got out of the service, about that time. And Django Reinhardt never even made a tour of the United States.
No, but being overseas in the war, I heard the name and got to know him that way. And then, of course, I got some of the, started listening to, where he was, records and this type of thing. It wasn't too easy to find his records at that time, but he was so well known. Once you heard a tune, you heard it. He played so well.
Did you pattern your style after him then?
No. I like to think that I have my own style.
Your style in guitar leans more towards jazz, actually, than it does towards country.
I love jazz. I was very fortunate to know and have as a good friend and a buddy, Stuff Smith. We got along so well together. I would go where he was playing, visit with him and his friends, and he would come and visit with me with my country friends. And if you ever heard Stuff Smith play a country tune, well, you don't really hear the melody too much here and there, but you just have a good time playing it,
We've mentioned 3 jazz guitarists. We've gone from Tony Matella, Django Reinhardt, to Stuff Smith. Were there any country guitarists that you palled around with or that you listened to early on when you started seriously playing the guitar?
I can think of only one that I really respected at that time that I knew, and I didn't know a lot of people because being from a small town at that time, you really don't get to know that many people. But there's one I wanted to know, and that was Merle Travis.
If you were going into a recording session right now, what kind of configuration would you like to have? What kind of instruments?
Well, in the first place, I've never been fortunate enough, and I don't think too many instrumental artists has either been fortunate enough to go in the studio and cut exactly what you want to cut or record, because they have a conception all what lined up for you, It's like, well, if you play on a double eagle in the key of C, and man, make it as simple as possible, we're going to sell more records, Turn on a lot of treble. I always heard this from Ken Nelson at Capitol. Turn more treble on, Bryant, And my ears wasn't tuned into the treble kick at all, but I did it.
A lot of highs.
A lot of highs. Barry knows what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Can you hear him on over here? You sit over here.
He can hear me.
Oh, okay.
Gene Bear's sitting in with us here in an interview with Jimmy Bryant here at Carrie's Country Store. What is your ideal group when you go into a session?
Well, when I do the next session, which I hope to do anytime, well, it's as you know, I'm a little bit on the weather now, and I have to. That's why I must sound a little short of breath on on the air, which I am. But when I get where I feel just right in doing the album, I'm going in to cut a new album, and I want to go in very free, drums and guitar only. Let me hang out somewhere, and then fill everything else in. I want to be just exactly free for once in my life. Just cut something that I want to cut, sell or not cut, sell. You know, one of those type of things. But I think my conception today of what will sell is as good as anyone, I guess you might say.
You know, Terry, it might be interesting to know one of the best albums I've ever heard, and I'm sure you're familiar, and Jimmy is with it, with Billy Strange and Tennessee Ernie with just guitar and voice. How much you can get out of just guitar and bass.
A little bit later in the program, but I wanted to start at the beginning and have Jimmy talk about your very first recording session.
My first recording session was, that's back to the country boy in me again. I was playing, just came out to California from Moultrie, Georgia, just being out of service, and I came out with Russell Hayden, which is Lucky on Hopalong Cassidy, and he invited me to come out, and I, of course, Hollywood, you know, sounded so great at that time. I was ready to go. Got here, started there for 2 years, worked some joints. I was working a little beer joint on Pico Boulevard. I think we were making probably $10 a night, and all the beer maybe we could drink or water.
Isn't that something?
You know,
That's...
phone call came in, and it was for Jimmy Bryant, the guitar player. We had a little radio show. It was 250 watt, I guess, whatever. Phone call with Jimmy Bryant from Tex Williams. And I knew the name Tex Williams because at that time Smoke Got Cigarette just came out, and it was a monster. He said he'd heard about me and heard me on the air playing guitar and would like me to do his next recording session. I said, well, what is that? You know, what's a recording session? You know, I really didn't know what it was, really. There was only 5 labels at that time. If you could be on one, you're very fortunate, you know. So we lined it up, and the next record we came out with was Wild Card.
We were talking about Wild Card in that first session.
I went in with a guitar case, very nervous, and met the big man at that time, Mr. Tex Williams, and we sat down and started working on Wild Card, and the tunes for the day. I really couldn't tell you, to be honest with you, who was on the session.
Do you know who the A&R man was with Capitol?
Lee Gillette, a very, one of the best. Still is, I would imagine. I haven't talked to Lee in quite a while, but it turned out to be a good thing for me because it led to a contract for myself, which you're probably going to put the record on right now. That's probably the first one I did. And it only says Jimmy Bryant on the record. And on the other side, it's Little Juan Pedro with Tennessee Ernie and Eddie Kirk, Cliffy Stone playing bass, Eddie Kirk playing rhythm, probably Muddy Barry on drums. I don't even think Speedy West was there. I don't even think I met him at that time.
And the song you did was Bryant's Boogie?
Bryant's Boogie. Mm-hmm. I remember being awful nervous and not knowing the business at all, the record business. After we did the session and the record came out, they just handed me maybe 10 or 15 records, and I'd just give them all to my mama, my sisters and brothers, and said, here's a record, you know, I don't know what's happening, you know, at all, but it was very strange in those days, with 5 or 6 labels, all major labels then. If you were on one of the labels, when you went to do a personal appearance, you always mentioned the label instead of your name. And so it drew a bigger crowd, you know, especially myself at that time.
Now, it's a strange record, the thing of Bryant's Boogie, because you're only on one side. Tennessee Ernie's on the other side. Didn't they give you more than one song to record? I
think they were really trying to find out what I could do and find out what Ernie could do, to tell you the truth. And, of course, Eddie Kirk was a great singer, and I haven't seen him in years, love to see him. And, but I think they wanted to find out what we all could do, you know. In fact, on Bryant's Boogie, in the second chorus, I make a very bad mistake, but I don't know if you notice it or not. But I do it twice, so to make it correct. And so I heard another record on it by a colored guy, that recorded with organ. And so I knew the mistake coming up, what was happening, but he played the same notes, and so I must have covered it up pretty well. So, but I mean, in those days, we didn't have, you didn't want to use too many acetates because it cost the company money. It cost them at least 25, 30 cents, you know, and with small artists like us, you know.
So that mistake has now become a standard part of Bryant's boogie.
That's it. It's been recorded by other people, and they still playing the mistake. And I love it. I love to hear it, you know. And turn out pretty well. And after you play the record, we'll get into how I met Speedy down the street from the beer joint. The name of the place, of course, Speedy's I generally let him do all the talking, because he's like Barrett. You know, you turn him loose talking, you know, and you don't have to worry about it.
They don't call him Speedy just for his playing.
No, he talks a lot, and of course I love him, and I've talked with him on the phone lately, and but I didn't let him do all the talking. But I forget the name of the place he was working at, but the name of the place I was working at was called Murphy's on Pico, and right next door I heard about a steel guitar player playing over there, right next door. So I go over on my intermissions and listen to Speedy. And Speedy would come over on his intermission and listen to me, and we got to be friends. That was the first time I'd met Speedy West. And he just went to work for Cliffy Stone in Hometown Jamboree, which was, that time was, I guess, probably Bear was at the, no, I guess it was the second or third television show was on. I think Spade Cooley was
First.
had a show,
Yeah.
TV show, and then Hometown Jamboree, and also
Town Hall Party.
Town Hall Party. Thank you, Bear.
Hometown Jamboree was the second one.
Right, and so he was working with Cliffy Stone, and that led to me being with Cliffy, which led with Speedy being with me, and from then on we formed a team.
So Capitol signed you as a team from then on?
Yes, he did. Yes, they did.
As sidemen?
No, as artist. No, we were artists for 5.5 years on Capitol. A lot of people don't know it, but and I don't either. I had any, but for
Somebody's got to know it.
I don't have the records, and I have never found anybody that had them all yet. But we did 65 record singles on Capitol alone, and I don't imagine you have those 65 singles.
Not 65, no.
I've got maybe 15 or 20, I think, maybe.
They are in demand by collectors, though.
Yes, but I don't have. But the 65 singles, I don't know what went with them. You know, maybe they burn them, you know, or whatever. But maybe they wouldn't sell, and they just burn the records. Well, you know, I don't know.
What kind of freedom were you given in Capitol Records, and to choose what songs you wanted to play or the instrumentation?
All the freedom at that time. And generally, we wrote the songs on the session, and right before the session. We get on an hour early. Speedy was never one to, and I was never one to really want to rehearse too much before a recording session when we went in to record together. It was fresh sound. It was a driving sound. Cliffy Stone and Muddy Barry, Pee Wee, oh my gosh, I forgot his name, drummer.
Adams?
Adams, yes. And they had such a driving rhythm section. We'd go in an hour before the session and maybe write maybe all the 4 tunes, or maybe just 2 or 1 or whatever, because they were so loose anyway. You know, they wasn't geared to the jazz field where it had to be all correct, arrangements. You know, we just did our arrangements as we went.
Now, these were very ambitious arrangements as far as country music was going then.
Oh yes. I like to be able to say that a lot of the musicians picked up a lot of licks from the old stuff, because we were so free. We didn't have echo in those days. We're going right direct to the board, which people that's listening to your show right now don't know what I'm talking about when I say direct to the board. But that means there's only one way in, like down a hallway, and it's going through one line direct to the record. And today, when you're recording, you can have maybe 24 men out there and have each one of them on a separate track where they can control it today. But back then, what you played, that was it. And if you took too many takes, the A&R man starts getting where he wants to go next door and have a good drink. You know, they wait for the break anyway. They're getting fidgety. The musicians say, well, what's the matter with Bryant, man? He can't cut it tonight, you know. Oh, come on, man, let's get out of here. You know, it starts getting heavy. But it was also, that was also the fun days.
On your sessions?
Oh, my gosh, yes. That's why I made so many mistakes. We were always, Speedy and I was, we were always very loose players on those sessions.
Of course,
and that's what made the sound, the looseness, and the sounded like it was having a good time.
But you see, you were the premier guitarist on the West Coast at that time. See, you were the one that wasn't, you know, you annihilated the competition.
There wasn't too many guitar players then. Of course, one of my favorite guitar players still is Barney Castle. I broke him into country music one day on a recording session. I called him to do a recording session with Mrs. Miller, and we did an album. And I used him on rhythm.
Crazy, Al.
Will success spoil Mrs. Miller?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did those things with Mrs. Miller, and then I did an album with her of all Buck Owens tunes.
Oh boy,
brother.
I remember that.
But it didn't sell any records because they thought of that as a put down to country music instead of taking it the way we really wanted to.
Yeah, she was a short-lived fad in the 1960s.
That's true. That's very true. And Buck Owens did it to her. He did it to a lot of people.
We were talking about experimentation. When you think of Capitol Records and experimentation, the first person I think of is Les Paul.
Les Paul, very good dear friend of mine. He came up with the multiple sound, which is a very simple thing today, but at that point had to be, of course we didn't understand it. But he came up with a sound. Well, I don't know how many millions of records he sold with Mary Ford.
Well, a lot of his popularity was due to Mary Ford's voice. Back in those days, the female singer with Capitol was very big. Kay Starr and Ella Mae Morse and Mary Ford. And Les Paul sort of took a back seat to her.
Well, that's true, but still the guitar playing and the sound was always credited towards Les. But Mary was so great.
Somewhere there's music, ain't the tune.
Did you get any tips from Les Paul?
No, he never tipped me when he came to listen to me. No, I know what you're talking about, Kerry. That wasn't my style. I didn't care about that. I cared about sitting down and doing my own thing, which I'm glad to say I can listen to Hee Haw today, and you'll hear, pay close attention to this, you will hear the theme song playing the lick off of Bryant's Boogie, the banjo player.
I'm going to listen to that next.
Listen for that.
Yeah, we'll have. That's
Okay.
right.
That's on the theme song. So I'm glad to hear all my little things going on even today with the kids. Eric Clapton, I've been told by him I'm his favorite guitar player, this type of thing. But I mean, I hate to get into bragging about myself, but
That's quite a testimonial coming from Eric Clapton.
I think so. Speedy and I, we wanted to be in the country field and add a little of a happy touch to our records. Just let it be loose, happy. Let it happen like it's going to happen. And if it's decent, going through the one track onto the acetate, we let it be that way. Just let it stay. We wasn't interested in having the big arrangers and violins and this type of thing. Les Paul, of course, was more on the pop side, more of a pop sound with old parts going and, you know, different guitar parts.
All the electronics and
Electronic goodies. And the sound, it was great.
Now, Les Paul, of course, also, he didn't do too many sessions as a sideman. He did a lot of solo sessions. You were recording with Tex Williams and Ernie Ford and other artists with Capitol in the early 50s. And then you came out with that one solo record, Bryant's Boogie. Did you have any aspirations to become a solo artist for Capitol?
Oh, at that time, no. No, of course not. Because once I met Speedy and heard his playing, I knew that there had to be a team effort there someplace, and there had to be a saleable record that could be sold with that type of sound.
Now, this sound was exemplified in the first album that you two put out together, I would say about 1955, is that right?
That's close to.
The album called Two Guitars Country Style. Tell us a little bit about the picture on the cover.
The picture on the cover shows myself holding Telecaster Fender guitar, And of course, Speedy West at that time was playing a Bigsby, a three-neck Bigsby guitar, which was very popular at that time, which was a very steady guitar, and he needed one because he did some show things with a steel guitar. It had to be like riding the steel guitar across the stage and, you know, kicking it. And we used to do some crazy things with guitars. But
Did he put wheels on it?
oh, there's wheels on it, yes. And I used to slap in the back of the head. He'd slap me in the back of the head. I'd dance on my guitar and whatever, you know, to try to create a show, which we did. The guitar on this cover here with me playing is a Telecaster Fender, which is the first one made in a one-car garage by Leo Fender. Leo and I walked uptown to Fullerton, a steel guitar. That's where they're at today because of him. You better believe it. And with Speedy's showmanship and with his way of playing, yeah, he's the top dog for steel guitar players even today.
I'm spending a lot of time on this album because I consider it to be a landmark recording of the 1950s. Now, up to that time, first of all, the long-playing record was brand new in country music about that time. And much more important than that, there hadn't been very many instrumentals done for Capitol Records, solely instrumentals. And this is one of the very first solo, all-instrumental albums ever released in country music. Now, there was Merle Travis's classic album, his Merle Travis guitar, which came out almost simultaneously with this one. Now, this album has a lot of traditional tunes on it, such as Blue Bonnet Rag, Old Joe Clark, This is Southland, and there's Arkansas Traveler. But there's some other songs on here that you and Speedy wrote, some strange names, such as this one we're going to play next. Tell us about how you came across this song here.
Oh my gosh! If you're talking about Serenade to a Frog, oh my gosh, that was one of the all-time nothings of a tune, all-time nothings, all-time great nothings of an idea.
I'm going to play it anyway.
Well, that's all right. But at that time, I had a crazy idea. I thought, well, we've been doing all these real swingy tunes, you know, and letting it really hang out, you know. And I thought, well, maybe the kids might pick up on the little kids. But maybe one of the first was aiming at the rock and roll field. I don't know. But I thought maybe the little kids would really dig Serenade to a Frog, and which is a nothing of a tune, you know. In fact, if you play it, only play about 8 bars and get into something else, you know. But,
all right, we'll do that.
Well, the musicians are going to go nuts when they hear it anyway. You don't know? Well, aren't you little talking to from Hollywood? No, you're not. Oh, what are you laughing for? Well, aren't you? You don't know. You don't know nothing, do you? Well, you should know that you're on Carrie's Country Store Show, don't you? You really do? No, you don't. Well, why'd you say it so fast? Well, everything you say is I don't know. Aren't you on KCSN in Northridge? Well, doggone it, do something. What are you going to do? Well, how about a bird? How about a bullfrog? How about, well, what? Hey, let's get on with the show. At a time when I'd probably been playing guitar, oh, maybe 5 years. It was at a time where I was doing, actually guitar, I was doing fiddle tunes on guitar. And at that time, it's like Roy Clark will tell you today, he's playing some of these same tunes today for his shows. He'll tell you that fiddle tunes on guitar is a little bit different to play. You know, they're really not that easy
A lot of these are fiddle tunes, those ones that I mentioned.
That's what I'm saying. They're not that easy to play.
Terry, one other thing you might point out, Jimmy, is the fact that not only the instruments, but you have to understand that the amplifiers you were coming through were nothing compared to what today's standards. I mean, you're talking about amplifiers, what, like a 10-inch, maybe one 10-inch speaker, one 12-inch speaker, and that was it.
Well, that's true. At the time this guitar was made, there wasn't such thing as a Fender amplifier. That came later. But Telecaster was first seen. The Fender guitar was first seen by me. I was seen, and I was doing Roy Rogers music at that time. I did 12 pictures with Roy Rogers, and under contract with Republic as an actor also.
What kind of role did you play with Roy?
I was the leader of the Roy Rogers writers. A lot of times we had the Sons of the Pioneers. Of course, I was always the extra guy in the Pioneers, you know, but when we had different groups, single groups, I was head of the group, you know. And you saying they put me on a horse one day and asked me to ride into the scene and pull the outlaw off of Roy Rogers fighting, and I fell off the horse, and that was the end of my horse career, you know. They just kept me on a guitar.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of country musicians that have ended their acting careers the very same way.
Right, but that was the first picture of the Fender guitar was ever seen, was in a Roy Rogers movie, and
True.
Leo Fender was there with me with bells on. He couldn't believe it. It was going to be in a Roy Rogers picture. Oh, we made the rounds of Fort Texas Williams, the Riverside Ranch. Oh, remember that?
Yeah, and also, that was in Pals of the Golden West, remember?
Pals of the Golden West.
Right.
And that was the start of the Fender Guitar Company.
With Jimmy Bryant at Carrie's Country Store, Gene Bear along with me, helping interview one of the finest, most innovative guitarists of all time. Jimmy, you were with Ernie Ford in the early 1950s. What were those sessions like?
Those sessions were happy sessions. That's why he made it also, is because of the sound of the sessions. We just, Speedy and I just did Jimmy Bryant and Speedy West and let him sing. It was a happy sound. We never cut such things as a crying beer joint record. You know, Blackberry Boogie, Shotgun Boogie.
He did a lot of boogie-woogie tunes, too.
Let it all hang, you know, let it be free. I think Ernie will go along with that. Jimmy and Speedy in the same group that we use. I think the sound is what did it.
And of course, Jimmy, such a voice. You work with many singers, but you got to say that Ernie's got a voice like there's no other.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I was with Cliffy Stone the night that Cliffy went to see Ernie about being on the television show. And he was a disc jockey here, and I can't tell you the station.
KXLA.
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 And you know what he would do? He would come in and he would sing the baritone of the bass part when they get together as a quartet.
That's true. And it's a funny thing, just a little touch of humor here. The boy that was toting our guitars in for the Hometown Jamboree show, carrying our baggage, unloading our guitars, seeing that my guitar was sitting in the correct place when I wanted to use it, or whatever, that's his manager today. Jim Lokes. That's Tennessee Ernie's manager today.
Has been for 20 years.
Has been all this time. Yeah. Jim Lokes was a great guy, and Ernie got to like him.
I got a record queued up, a classic duet with Tennessee Ernie and Kay Starr.
Oh my goodness, so good. They are.
Yeah. And you were on those sessions with Speedy.
Right.
And who else was in that session?
I'd say it was the same group.
Muddy Berry on drums.
Muddy Berry.
Harold Hensley.
Harold Hensley, same group. Eddie Kirk on rhythm. Billy Liebert on piano. Bless his heart. And he's with the Sons of Pioneers now, playing accordion. And it's the same story. I still say it was the same story in the old days with the ones we backed. That's why they called Speedy and I on recording sessions at that time, because anybody we backed, we tried to create a happy sound, just play and be ourselves. And at that time, thank God we wasn't too good to be over their heads and wasn't good enough to be anywhere else.
Well,
so,
Jimmy,
you know.
the important thing, as Terry pointed out before, played behind the artist and the booklet, which is so important today if you're going to record records. I mean, you would play behind the artist. Yeah.
Right. It's this the tune they did, but it was always a kind of a happy little lick we played. And Speedy always doing the doo-wahs and the pedal going and the kicking and, you know, Sometimes you hear me grunting, and so what, But that's the way. That's beautiful. That's happy.
Hey, Jimmy, this is Ernie. When we first met, it was Tennessee Ernie. Then it was Tennessee Ernie Ford, and it still is. And we're just sitting around rapping about you and all the talent that you've got, and you will have for a long, long time, and the people that you picked for and played, and we've sang. We've sat around and done everything from gospel, and we've had a little beer or two every once in a while, and we just sitting around rapping about you and talking about you. My personal thoughts and prayers are with you, and we're thinking about you, and whatever is to come to pass, I know you're strong enough to handle it, and you'll always have the love of many of your friends in your heart and in our hearts, and you just hang in there from old Ern, and we'll, I'm sure, be talking to you soon again.
Do you remember the first time you saw Jimmy Bryant play the guitar?
Yes, I almost remember. It was in the early to middle 1950s when I first saw Jimmy's knuckles work up and down the neck of that guitar. And when you see picking like that, Jimmy, I think, was unique in the way that he could take solo parts on a guitar like I had never heard. It wasn't a Merle Travis type or anything like that. It was a Jimmy Bryant. I think Jimmy could be tagged as having like Merle Travis style of picking. There could be one Jimmy Bryant's name put on it, because I have never heard anybody since that time play like Jimmy can and like he can improvise.
So you would say he was far ahead of his time when he started with you?
I would say a little bit. Jimmy was very definitely a part of mine, and there's a very warm place in my heart for him.
Now, Bryant wrote a song for you and the late Joe Fingers Carr called Tailor-Made Woman.
That's right.
This was kind of a change of pace for you, wasn't it?
It sure was. But, back in those days, we'd try anything. It was a beautiful change of pace was when I did record with K-Star. That record sold around 900,000 records.
Wow, I love Ocean of Tears myself.
Yeah, I like it too. And I have since worked with Kay at the Sahara in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
We sat down and talked about the musicians that were on the session, and we mentioned Jimmy and his guitar playing.
Why do I like you?
Did for Capitol several years after the duet album with Speedy West. This one's called Country Cabin Jazz.
Well, this is only it's only taken from the tunes we recorded before with Speedy. That's all. They just,
Fiddle tunes, you mean?
No. These tunes were cut before as singles or whatever, and then released with Speedy and I. And they just went back and took what they thought would sell, or a little bit on the jazz side, and called it Country Cabin Jazz with Jimmy Bryant.
Now, I notice one thing that I've admired on your songs, the ones that you and Speedy have written together or separately, are the titles themselves. I think that artists before your time haven't been imaginative at all with titles. That's what attracted me to Serenade to a Frog and things like that. But on this album, especially for Capitol, you could almost predict what the song is going to be like by looking at the title. Now, let me read off some of these. Stratosphere Boogie, Yodeling Guitar, Frettin' Fingers, Pickin' Peppers. How did you come up with these titles?
It's the tune. It's the tune, the way they lay, and you used to get such a big bang out of the titles of these things, we call them, And steel guitar players, they have a funny way of titling tunes. It's either the Bo Diddley Rag, or, it's got to be a rag, or Beaumont Rag with Bob Wills, or Buddy Emmons Slept Late, or whatever, it don't make sense, but that's with steel guitar players. But sometimes you can get an idea, I guess, by the title. That reminds me of a tune that Errol Anstey released about 2 years ago, and I was in town and I did a session with him, and I know for sure that he bought one and I bought one, so we could have a record release. That's how bad it was, really. Not bad, but I mean it was bad as far as the commercialism today. We just played for ourselves and forgot it, and let the tape run, But I think it was Biddly Beep was the title of the tune, And Harold, he named this tune, And I said, Biddly Beep, what are we going to do with this?
before the title, or?
The tune, Bread and Fingers, was a kind of a classic, I guess, on that particular album, because at that time I think they had 3 ways to overdub, 3 channels. So I took the opportunity to overdub that tune, and if you played the tune, it's probably a little bit complicated to play harmony to it, but we got through it.
Attitude of the West Coast musicians, of course you were playing out here in Hollywood for quite a long time. What was the attitude of the West Coast musicians towards Nashville and the Grand Ole Opry?
Well, really none. At that time, they like to talk about it today and think they were, but we never thought of Nashville, because all the country artists, really, the ones that were really selling records, they were cut in Hollywood, right there.
That's right.
They were cut right here. Nashville didn't mean a thing back then. It had the Grand Ole Opry, and that was it.
Now,
But the artists, the big artists, were cut here.
now you mentioned the big 5 labels. A lot of RCA and Decca material was recorded in Nashville. MGM also.
Well, that's true, but that went back to the, your Tennessee, not Tennessee Ernie Ford, but
Red Foley?
well, Foley. Oh yes, he was good.
Eddie Arnold.
I was thinking of Eddie Arnold, and
It was an RCA.
Ernest Tubb.
Ernest Tubb was on Decca, and Foley was on Decca.
Well, there wasn't not too many people recording in Nashville at that time. They were all out here or coming out here to record.